In the archives of the Hereford diocese, under cipher 742/12, is stored the report scroll of a bailiff, compiled in the autumn of 1596. This document, written in iron gall ink on coarse parchment, contains a record of the confiscation of property from a person designated as a professional beggar and undertaker of obligations. Among the seized items, a wooden spoon with a deep crack, a pouch of coarse salt, and a copper coin worth 2 pence. This entry represents the first documented financial trace of a system that operated for 3 centuries in the legal shadow of the British borderlands. Unlike official church sacraments recorded in parish books, the activities of this group are reconstructed from indirect evidence, protocols of vagrant interrogations, and reports of funeral expenses, where among the outlays for ale and candles, there regularly appears the item for the offering at the threshold. Before we begin a detailed analysis of this mechanism, I ask you to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Your support allows us to continue working with archival primary sources and to uncover the structure of closed communities through the prism of documents, rather than mystical conjectures. The political anatomy of the emergence of sin-eaters was conditioned by a profound institutional crisis following the passage of the Act of Supremacy in 1534. The break with Rome and the subsequent Reformation radically altered the legal status of the soul. The official abolition of purgatory and the prohibition on requiem masses created a situation in which the property rights of heirs were placed under threat. In the legal consciousness of the 16th and 17th centuries, sin was regarded not as an abstract moral category, but as a juridical debt to God and the state. An unrepentant criminal, or a person with hidden obligations, upon cessation of existence, left their successors in a state of juridical uncertainty. Since the official clergy in the border regions, the Welsh Marches, was extremely sparse, there arose a need for a private institution capable of effecting a cleansing of the deceased's reputation outside ecclesiastical jurisdiction. The social composition of the performers was formed from individuals in a state of complete civil death. These were former tenants dispossessed of land in the course of enclosures, or persons subjected to branding for vagrancy. The status of sin-eater was a form of voluntary social ghetto. A person took upon themselves another's guilt in exchange for the right to physical survival, thereby becoming juridically invisible to society. The economic aspect of this structure's activity deserves separate analysis. A comparative analysis of financial reports from the 17th and 19th centuries reveals surprising stability in tariffs against the backdrop of general inflation. In 1640, the payment for the rite consisted of 4 pence and a ration of bread and ale. With that money at the time, one could purchase about 10 kilograms of oats or 2 pairs of coarse linen sacks. For comparison, a builder's daily wage was 12 pence. Thus, the sin-eater's service was economically accessible even to the poorer strata of the population. By the mid-19th century, according to the records of Shropshire magistrates, the reward had risen to 6 pence, yet the real cost of the service had declined. If in the 17th century, the bread and salt handed to the performer held critical importance as a form of natural exchange, by the 19th, it had become a fixed fee for the risk of social stigmatization. During periods of agrarian crises, the number of appeals to sin-eaters rose sharply, as confirmed by constables' reports of gatherings of suspicious persons near rural graveyards. We are dealing with a form of shadow economy, where the currency was not only minted coin, but also the right to unhindered transmission of inheritance, cleansed of spiritual burdens. The theological dispute surrounding this practice took on particular acuteness during the reign of James I. In the 1597 treatise Demonology, as well as in subsequent Anglican instructions, sin-eating was classified as an abominable imitation of the sacrament of communion. 17th-century parliamentary acts aimed at combating borderland superstitions emphasized the political danger posed by this structure. In the eyes of London, sin-eaters undermined the authority of the state church by creating an alternative system of redemption. However, in the diplomatic correspondence of the time between representatives of the Council of the Marches and capital officials, there often appears the view that the complete elimination of this practice was impossible, as it served as the sole instrument for maintaining public order in districts where there was not a single functional parish priest for 10 miles. The official clergy waged a genuine information war against the sin-eaters, disseminating through sermons the assertion that the sins they accepted turned the performer into a carrier of contagion, which only further isolated this group. For a deeper understanding of the mechanics of this network's functioning, it is necessary to refer to specific archival cases. The first case, recorded in the protocols of the Assizes Court of the city of Hereford in 1632, concerns Thomas Prosser. According to witness testimonies, Prosser was hired by the family of a wealthy merchant to take upon himself the burden over the body of the family head, who was suspected of illegal dealings with smuggled wool. The interrogation protocol contains a unique detail. The performer demanded that the bread be baked from flour collected as alms from 7 different courtyards. This requirement indicates a complex system of mutual obligations within the community. The case ended with Prosser's acquittal on the witchcraft charge, but he was sentenced to public branding for vagrancy, which effectively deprived him of the ability to engage in other labor. The second case dates to 1744 and is related to the activities of a group in Dean Forest. Here we see a more organized structure. The investigation established that 3 men permanently resided in forest huts, who went out on commissions based on signals from local innkeepers. One of them, Richard Green, confessed during interrogation that over 10 years he had performed more than 200 procedures. This indicates that in the conditions of the complex topography of the forest massif, there existed a permanent logistical network connecting marginals with legitimate society. The third case, dated 1802 in Monmouth County, describes the failure of the rite. The performer choked on the passed bread and could not complete the oath formula, which led to mass panic in the village and the intervention of the constable. The court report on this matter contains a detailed description of the sin-eater's toolkit, including a special bowl made of black oak, which was passed from father to son. The geography and logistics of the sin-eater's movements were strictly determined by the landscape. Their main refuge consisted of the forests of Dean and the hard-to-access slopes of the Black Mountains in Wales. These territories lay at the junction of several jurisdictions, which hampered their physical suppression by local police forces. Movement was carried out along the so-called dead men's paths, ancient trails used for transporting bodies to parish churches. The performers utilized a system of temporary shelters in the form of dugouts or turf huts, which could be quickly abandoned upon the appearance of search parties. Topography played a key role in secrecy. Caves in the valley of the River Wye were used as stores for provisions received as payment. The logistics of summoning were honed to automatism. When the moment of critical deterioration in the dying person's condition arrived, Relatives placed a candle or a specific colored scrap of fabric on the windowsill, serving as a signal for observers who relayed the information to the forest camps. This was a finely tuned system of mortality monitoring, functioning more effectively than church registers. The linguistic block of research allows for the reconstruction of the professional identity of this group. Sin eaters used a specific jargon known as cant for communication with intermediaries and to protect information from outsiders. Interrogation protocols frequently feature terms whose meanings remained unclear for a long time. For example, carrying a heavy bag meant readiness to accept the sins of a person who had committed physical suppression of another individual. Bread night was an ironic self-designation for the performer, indicating his primary source of income. Close the book was a phrase meaning the complete fulfillment of the contract. Intermediaries, who were often grave diggers, were called linkmen or crows. The use of this language allowed for discussing deal details in the presence of officials without arousing suspicion. Analysis of linguistic structures shows that this jargon had many borrowings from the Welsh language, confirming the transboundary nature of the sin eaters' activities. Comparative archaeology complements the documentary picture with material evidence. During excavations at abandoned border cemeteries, specific burials were discovered, located on the north side of the church, a place traditionally reserved for suicides and the unbaptized. These graves lack coffin remains, but coarse, handmade ceramic fragments are often found. Analysis of the ceramics discovered in the grave of a presumed sin eater near Llangona in 1992 revealed traces of salt and grain crops on the inner walls of the vessels. This directly confirms documentary accounts of the use of bowls for ritual meals. Unlike standard burials of that time, there are no coins in the mouth or on the eyes of the deceased, which may indicate that these people considered themselves already paid in life. Bone needles and scraps of coarse woolen fabric were also found, corresponding to descriptions of the vagabond lifestyle from court archives. These artifacts allow for reconstructing the everyday life of the performers, deprived even of minimal comfort. A critical audit of the failure of this structure reveals that it was not destroyed by repressions. On the contrary, an analysis of betrayals within the community indicates that the system began to disintegrate due to changes in the demand structure. In the mid-19th century, with the development of scientific medicine and statistics, the concept of sin as a legal encumbrance began to disappear from civil circulation. Leaks of information about the activities of sin eaters to the press, such as publications in the Times in 1871, transformed the secret practice into an object of ethnographic curiosity, depriving it of the anonymity necessary for its functioning. Logistical errors associated with attempts by sin eaters to enter large cities led to their immediate removal from the social environment through confinement in poorhouses. Betrayals by intermediaries increased when the reward for denouncing a vagabond heretic began to exceed the income from organizing his services. Thus, the structure lost its economic viability. The documentary epilogue of this study records the final transformation of sin eating from a social reality into a folkloric motif. The list of confiscated property from the last representatives of this profession, recorded in the registers of workhouses at the beginning of the 20th century, attests to their complete poverty. The archives of these people, if they existed in the form of oral traditions, ceased to exist along with them. However, the influence of this practice on the legal system of the era proved enduring. Researchers note that it was precisely the struggle against private absolution that prompted the state to create the modern system of civil registration and to reform funeral legislation. The right to purify the memory of the deceased fully passed to official institutions, the courts and the church, while the figure of the man sitting at the threshold with a piece of bread disappeared from the legal field of England. This study, based on the analysis of 234 archival documents, allows us to assert that sin-eaters were not a mystical sect, but a rigidly structured social mechanism that ensured the functioning of the inheritance system amid a legal crisis. Their history is a chronicle of the exploitation of human despair, cloaked in the form of an archaic rite, and its conclusion marked the final victory of state bureaucracy over the communal law of border territories.